Long ago, in the years before the gods of Olympus had taken their thrones, when the world was still young and unfinished and the heavens were still being arranged into the shapes we know today, there lived a goddess whose name was Asteria. Her name meant of the stars, and she was a Titan, born in the great dim dawn of creation, when the cosmos itself was still soft as wet clay, and the boundaries between sky and sea and earth were not yet settled. Her parents were the Titan Coeus, the keeper of the axis around which the heavens turned, and the silver-veiled Phoebe, the goddess of the moon and of prophecy. From them she inherited her gentleness, her quietness, and her deep affinity with all the things of the night. While the other young gods grew loud and bright and hungry for the world to know them, Asteria grew toward the stars. She listened to them, she walked among them, and in time she came to belong to them, in the way that some beings belong not to their families or their thrones, but to a particular hour and a particular quality of light. She was the goddess of the falling stars. When a streak of silver fire arced across the night sky, mortals far below would lift their heads and feel, without knowing why, that something tender and brief had just passed through the world. That feeling was Asteria. She was the keeper of the small bright moments that the larger gods never noticed, the patron of nocturnal prophecies whispered into still water, the quiet attendant of dreams that came to sleepers in the dark. Her sister was Leto, who would in time be loved by Zeus and would bear his children Apollo and Artemis. But Asteria, in the early years, had no such fate written for her. She walked the slow paths of the night sky alone, and the stars themselves seemed to lean toward her when she passed, as though greeting one of their own. She lived in a time of change. The Titans, the old gods who had ruled the world since the first separation of earth and sky, were beginning to lose their grip on the cosmos. Zeus and his siblings, the younger gods, had risen against them in a war so great that the very mountains had been hurled like stones. When the long war ended, the Titans were defeated, most of them imprisoned in the deep pit of Tartarus, far below the reach of light. But a few of the younger Titans, those who had not fought against Zeus, were allowed to remain free. Asteria was one of these. She had taken no part in the war. She had stayed in her quiet realm among the stars, watching the fires of conflict from a great distance, mourning what she could not stop, and tending to the small, luminous things that needed her even when the world below was burning. And so, when the dust of the war settled, and Zeus took his throne upon the mountain of Olympus, Asteria was permitted to remain in the night sky, still walking her old paths, still keeping her old watch. But the king of the new gods looked down from his bright throne, and his eye fell upon her. Zeus, who had taken many lovers among the goddesses and the mortal women of the earth, saw in Asteria something that drew him, perhaps the very quietness that had kept her safe through the war, perhaps the soft, cool light she carried with her wherever she went. Whatever it was that he saw, he desired her. And in those days, when Zeus desired a being, there were few who could refuse him openly. He had taken his place at the center of the new order, and his will moved through the cosmos like a storm front, unstoppable and unanswerable. Asteria felt his attention turn upon her, and she understood, as one understands the first cold touch of a coming winter, that the quiet life she had known among the stars was no longer hers to keep. She did not protest. She did not gather the other gods to plead her case, for she knew there was no court that would hear it. She did not raise her voice against the King of the heavens, for she knew that a raised voice would only bring him closer. What she did instead was older and quieter and stranger than any of those things. She decided to leave. Not to flee in the way a small thing flees a larger thing, with panic and noise and the hope of being missed in the dark, but to leave in the way a star leaves the sky, sliding from one form into another, slipping out of the shape she had been given and into a shape that no god could lay a hand upon. She would not refuse Zeus with her words. She would refuse him with her whole self, by ceasing to be the self he had set his eye upon. And so she ran. She rose from her place among the stars, and she fled across the dome of the heavens, with Zeus pursuing her in the form of a great eagle, his vast wings beating the air behind her, his shadow stretching across the lower clouds. She ran with the speed of a goddess who had nothing left to lose and one last choice still to make, and as she ran, she began to change. The form she had carried since the morning of her birth, the tall and silver-veiled figure that the stars had loved, began to soften and gather itself in upon her own bones. Her arms grew light. Her cloak of starlight loosened from her shoulders and trailed behind her like the tail of a comet. Her voice, which had spoken the old languages of prophecy, narrowed itself to a single, small, clear cry. And then, between one heartbeat and the next, she was no longer a goddess fleeing across the sky. She was a quail, small and quick and brown, with wings that beat in fast, urgent rhythm against the high, cold air, and the great eagle behind her could not understand, for a moment, how its prey had disappeared. She fell. She did not glide gracefully down through the night. She fell the way a star falls, the way something whose time in the sky is over falls, with a slow and luminous helplessness that was not panic but something closer to release. The dark sea stretched far below her, and she fell toward it. Around her, the small bright stars she had once tended to seem to slow in their courses and watch her pass. Her wings, the small new wings of the bird she had become, beat once more and then opened wide, not to catch the air but to let the air pass through her. She felt the weight of her old form, the weight of being known and being seen and being desired, drop away from her like a stone slipping from an open hand. There was a great quiet in her as she fell. She was not afraid. She was no longer the thing that had been pursued. She was something stranger now, something the king of the gods had not anticipated, something the cosmos itself had never seen before. She was a goddess in the act of becoming. She struck the sea with a sound that the night recorded and never forgot. A soft, luminous splash, like a star quenched in dark water. And in the moment of her striking, she changed again. The small bird that had carried her down through the sky dissolved into the foam, and from the place where she had fallen, a piece of land began to rise. It rose slowly at first, a curve of pale stone breaking the surface of the dark sea, and then it grew, expanding outward in slow ripples until it had become a small island, low and rocky and beautiful, with the kind of stark loveliness that only places untouched by the hands of either gods or mortals can possess. The island had no name yet. It drifted on the surface of the sea, not anchored to the earth's deep foundations like the other islands of the world, but free, moving where the currents took it, untouched and untouchable. And this island was Asteria. She had not died, she had simply become. Zeus, in the form of his great eagle, circled above the place where she had fallen, and he understood at last that he had been refused in the only way that could not be answered. He could not pursue an island, he could not desire a piece of land. The goddess he had wanted was gone, transformed into something he had no claim upon, and there was nothing left for him to do but turn his wings back toward Olympus and let the matter end. Asteria, the floating island, drifted on the dark sea, and the stars she had once walked among bent their old paths to keep their watch over her. The moon, who had been her mother's domain, rose each night and laid its silver light across her stones, and she lay there beneath it, free and quiet, and finally beyond the reach of any hand that would have held her against her will. For long ages after, she drifted. The world above her changed, its cities rose and fell. New gods grew old, mortals were born and lived and died and were born again in the slow turning of the generations. And then, one day, her own sister Leto came to her, weary and seeking shelter. Leto had been loved by Zeus and was now pursued across the whole of the earth by the jealous wrath of Hera, the king's wife. Every land Leto tried to set her foot upon refused her, fearing the queen's anger. Every island turned her away. But Asteria, the floating island, the one piece of land that was not bound to the earth, and so was not bound by the earth's fears, opened herself to her sister. Leto came ashore upon her sands, and there, sheltered by the goddess who had once chosen to disappear, she gave birth to her twin children, the bright Apollo and the silver Artemis, the new god of the sun and the new goddess of the moon. And in that birth, the floating island was at last anchored to the foundations of the world. It became fixed in place, and the gods named it Delos, which means the brilliant one, in honor of the light that had been born upon it. But before it was Delos, it had been Asteria, and though her name passed into quietness, the island remembered for her. And so the story of Asteria became one of the strangest and most beautiful in the long memory of the Greek world. She had refused the king of the gods, not with weapons, not with words, but by becoming something he could no longer recognize. She had taught the cosmos a lesson it had not known until she taught it, that there is more than one way to refuse, that sometimes the answer to a force you cannot stop is not to stand against it, but to step sideways out of its reach, that the dignity of disappearance is a real dignity, and that becoming small or quiet or elsewhere is not the same as being defeated. Asteria did not win her freedom by being stronger than Zeus. She won it by being more imaginative than he was. And in the long ages that followed, every god and every mortal who had ever felt themselves pursued by a force they could not openly defy carried somewhere in the quiet of their own hearts a small share of her example, and of her own line, in another tale told beneath other stars, would come the goddess Hecate, keeper of crossroads and torches and the threshold places of the world. But that is a story for another night. Asteria herself remained, in her own way, in the sky she had once walked. The stars she had loved continued to fall, just as they had always fallen, but now they fell with a new meaning, a meaning the cosmos had learned from her. And if you have ever stood beneath the open night and watched a single bright streak of silver fire cross the sky, and felt, without knowing why, that something tender and free had just passed through the world, Then you have remembered Asteria, perhaps without knowing her name. Every star that falls is, in some quiet way, Asteria still falling, still choosing, still becoming. And the dark sea is always waiting, patient and welcoming, to receive whatever she has decided to be next.